Are we live?
We're live.
Okay, cool. Well, hello everybody, and thank you for coming to actually the first ever evidence community call. This has wound up being a bit more popular than we expected, so we're super excited to have everybody here. I'm here with Archie, who likely many of you have seen in Slack and on GitHub, helping you fix issues and build with evidence. And then also with the less visible but equally important Brian, who built a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. Yeah, so thanks for coming, and we'll hop into it. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat on whatever platform you're on, and Archie is going to be looking out for those and interjecting with them throughout the discussion. Cool. Well, let's go. So today we're talking about our upcoming release of Universal SQL. And since there are a fair number of people here who seem like they might be new to the project or are just kind of checking out evidence, we'll start with just a little bit of background on what evidence is. So evidence is a tool for building polished data products with SQL and Markdown. So it's a framework for building data apps and data apps, reports, decision support tools, that type of thing. It's completely open source. It's code-based, and we think it's a really powerful alternative to drag and drop BI tools and other kind of data app frameworks. So this is an example of a really simple evidence report. So this is a Markdown file. It includes some SQL that's inlined into the file. That SQL generates some data, and then we're leveraging that data in a couple places. So in a little value component and in a bar chart. And when this data changes, these values and these charts will be updated. So that's kind of the core of evidence, is SQL and Markdown to make reports. So when do we see teams using evidence? It's basically when there's a high bar on kind of user experience, governance, maintainability, and reusability of their data products. So customer-facing and embedded applications, consultants who are building sort of managed services for their own customers, people who are building data products for their own organization, but for executives or like large audiences in their companies. And then a whole slew of people who are building analytics as a product businesses. So these are business lines on top of their existing business, or often we're seeing individuals who have a unique insight into a specific industry who have built out an analytics product for their customers. And so all of these are super interesting and exciting to us, and we're stoked to support all of these types of use cases. So here's what we've heard from the community on evidence. So SQL focused, narrative and text, very fast and easy to deploy. These are all really great things about the tool and things that we want to preserve going forward. But people also want multiple data sources. So today you can connect evidence to a single data backend. Lots of applications require you to connect to multiple backends. Non-SQL data sources, so connecting an evidence project to an API endpoint, some flat files, an S3 bucket, those types of things. Inputs and filters. This is got to be the number one request, is folks want to write templated SQL that accepts user input and lets them build more interactive types of reports. Much larger data sets. So I think this will be true forever, but whatever the limit is, people will have managed to push the product to that limit. And then interactive components. So toggles and inputs that are part of an actual component that's on the page. So as an example, a pivot table type of interface on that you can drop into your pages and reports. So we want to make all of that stuff easy to build in the tool, really performant, and make it possible to build applications that include all those features without also walking away from many of the things that make evidence special today. So Our approach to solving that is what we're calling Universal SQL. So Universal SQL has three kind of big ideas in it. So one is support for multiple data sources. The second one is the evidence query engine. And the third one is interactive components. And so I'm going to step through each of those, and then we'll do a demo and some Q&A. So multiple data sources. The way that this works under Universal SQL is that evidence can support any number, a single evidence project can support any number of sources. So multiple data warehouses like Snowflake and BigQuery, multiple connections to the same data warehouse, flat files, API endpoints, production databases like Postgres. All of your queries are version controlled as text as part of your project. Queries resolve to Parquet at build time. Parquet is a really fast and efficient file format for doing data storage. Non-SQL sources are now supported in the product. So we've got a prototype of a Google Sheets connector as an example, where you can define which sheets you want to pull into your project with just a YAML file. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, we're opening up all of these APIs to third parties. So if you want to build your own connector for your own database of choice for your project, or you want to build a connector for everybody else to use, you can do that under Universal SQL. So that's the first big thing. Evidence projects are no longer restricted to a single database backend. You can connect to anything, and we're using Parquet under the hood to make this all possible. Okay, that's multiple data sources. Archie, any questions so far?
Drive on, all good.
Cool. All right. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is the evidence query engine trademark. So it's DuckDB. So what we're offering here is fast interactive queries in the browser. So every evidence project going forward will include a instance of DuckDB that will run interactively in the browser with access to all of the data that's been returned by your data sources. All of the SQL inside evidence markdown files will be able to query that DuckDB database. SQL inside your markdown files can be templated to accept user input from other components, things like dropdowns and filters and that type of stuff. And then around this instance of DuckDB, we, and Brian, has done a ton of work to make this a really, really seamless kind of end user experience. So we pre-render all of the content on your page so that when somebody lands on your page, they're not waiting for all of the data to load. They see all the charts and graphs and outputs landed on the page almost instantly. And in the background, we load all the data behind the scenes. We're doing lazy execution against this database. We're debouncing inputs, which I'll show in the demo in a minute. So we're doing a ton of work around this DuckDB database. And from your perspective, all this looks like is just writing SQL into your markdown files. So trying to make this completely seamless, but we're super, super excited about what this unlocks for the tool. RJ, I saw a couple things come across there.
Cool that you will be able to do using this format. So you can put that select star from orders where customer name equals, and then put your parameter in that the user is able to have power over.
Yeah, this is the number one thing that people ask us about is how do I accept inputs? How do I put filters into my SQL? And it will all become possible with Universal SQL, and also it's very, very fast. So when your users make changes to an input, you get sort of 500 millisecond or below query response times, and it actually feels good to use data products that are built this way. So that's the evidence query engine. It's DuckDB running in the browser. It's completely kind of seamless for you to use. You can template the inputs to it, and it's super, super fast.
Adam, we've had a question come in from Patrick. I'm just going to put it on screen.
Yeah, exactly. So Patrick, that's exactly right. So at build time, we store all of that data. We actually store it in Parquet, and then the DuckDB instance that's running in the project is querying those Parquet files. And DuckDB is really effective at querying Parquet. Brian, so, anything to tack on that?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, when we say DuckDB instance, the evidence projects are still building to static files. You don't need to like stand up an instance of DuckDB to use this. That instance of DuckDB that we're talking about is actually running in the user's browser. So nothing for like your deployment, like pipelines or like hosting solutions will change, other than like the added step of loading those initial source datas.
A couple more questions coming in. I'm going to start with this one from Danny. So the question is, with the data being stored client-side for interactive queries, how do we manage the amount of data being downloaded by the client? Thinking especially of mobile or low bandwidth users.
So there's a couple pieces there. So one is you're going to need to think to a certain degree about your users and their use case. So if you know you're serving people who are going to be on mobile and have super low bandwidth, then you want to keep your kind of source queries tighter. So that's kind of one piece of this. The other piece is that DuckDB is extremely intelligent about querying Parquet. And so it does something called predicate pushdown, and Brian can kind of expand on this. But basically, if you put filters in your where clause, it'll avoid sending the full source file over the wire. It'll just send the kind of byte range of that Parquet file that's required to satisfy the query over the wire. So even if you had a very large source query, if you're filtering it for a small sort of portion of it, only that small portion is coming over the wire. And then the third piece is what is initially sent to your user's device is a pre-rendered version of the page, which is just kind of the HTML that's required to, give the appearance of all the charts and graphs and tables that would be appearing on the page by default before they've interacted with filters. While they're looking at that is when we're sending the data over to support any interactions that they're going to do. So the initial page load times and sort of weight of those pages is much, much lower than the total weight that would be required to support subsequent interactions. So you kind of buy time by doing that.
Yeah, I think like to add one thing to that too is like Parquet is compressed. Like it's a compressed binary format, which means the files are smaller than the equivalent JSON files. And so if you're using the same data volumes with Universal SQL that you're using in your current project, you're going to see a pretty big performance bump on these like slower devices, both from the initial load time and then just like timed interactivity.
Yeah. I think something that we maybe didn't specify at the front as well is you manage how much data is being pulled in from your sources. So you can do a select star from all of your tables if you want, but you can also be more mindful of how much data you're importing. Sometimes it can make sense when you're developing to start with a select star, but then once you're a bit clearer on exactly what you're going to be exposing to users, just restricting down that query that you're doing, and that will also give you performance benefits. Final question on this section before we move on. So this question is, can Evidence Query Engine be used outside Evidence as a standalone library? I think, Brian, maybe a question for you, this one.
I think the answer is kind of. Right now, there are bits and pieces that you can use in your own projects. but it's not really the full package. We've talked a little bit about, you know, maybe making that an option, but we haven't really landed on which way we want to go there.
So yeah, I would say I think it's something we are considering is how much do we want to offer these pieces outside of the kind of overall like full stack package of evidence and make them things that you could plug into other applications if you wanted to. So yeah, that's a great question. We're still thinking about it.
All right, I think that's all the questions for now. Should we keep going?
Sure. Okay, so then the last piece to Universal SQL is interactive components. So components themselves can issue their own queries. So components can accept a query as input. They can modify that query. They can construct their own queries, and then they can issue them against the query engine. And so this enables components to encapsulate SQL logic and presentation into one, very terse expression. And so as an example, if you, we'll show a very early version of this, but if you have like a pivot table type of interface that you want to present on top of a query result, that's something that you can build with just a single component. And then that component will handle issuing queries in response to user input and interaction. And then again, all of these APIs are available to third-party plugin developers. So it won't be just evidence components that can work with the query layer. Anybody who's developing a component for evidence will have access to the APIs required to generate queries. I'll pause just before the demo. Archie, any last questions on that?
None as yet.
Cool. All right, over to a demo. So this is an evidence project. This is running in the kind of Universal SQL version of the tool. This is running in dev mode. This is still a pre-release, so that there's a little bit of jank in some places here. But this is the basics of an evidence project. So I'll show an example of querying sources. So this query here is written into my markdown. I have a source in my project, which is a connection to a BigQuery instance. I've named that connection bikes because I'm using it to pull information about Austin's bike share program. And here, am I able to zoom in slightly? Yes. Is that a little nicer?
Looks good.
So this is an inline SQL query. This is running in the evidence query engine. So this is DuckDB syntax, and we're querying from the results of a query against BigQuery that we've called trips as part of the bike source. So very similar to the kind of existing experience of using evidence and writing queries, but you could be querying from a table that's coming from Snowflake, a table that's coming from BigQuery, a flat file, and a CSV. You can do joins across them, all of those types of things. Next cool piece is inputs. So I'll go ahead and hide the queries here. So this is a page. We're querying again that bikes source, which has 2 million records or so in it. And we've built a little input component. We're going to be building a lot more input components over the coming months, but a simple kind of slider here. And the slider's nice because it lets you show a few of the features of this input system. So as I adjust the slider here, you'll see the response time is kind of less than half a second to requery that Parquet file and update the results. And we're going to make pretty heavy use of animation across all of our components to help people understand what your inputs are doing to the actual page there. So we're building things like calculators and interactive reports and that type of thing. Animation ends up being hugely important to show people what's actually changing as they interact with the tool. And I'll just show the SQL here. So right here is where we've got a little template reference in the source code. And then on your page, if you're in development mode or you're looking at your queries, you can see them just updating live. And because the inputs go directly into your SQL queries, you can do all sorts of interesting things like templating, a date trunk function. So if I want to toggle this chart from being monthly to weekly, I can build a little toggle to do that type of thing. We're still thinking through how much of this should be, components that you're wiring into your own SQL expressions versus which parts of this should just be baked into our components. So as an example, like tweaking the aggregations on a chart, that's probably something that we'll just build as part of our charting library so that you don't have to hand code those each time you want to offer that up. But all of that kind of gets unlocked by Universal SQL. Archie, I'll pause there.
Yeah. One thing I just add is I'm not sure if Adam said it explicitly, but this interactive that we're running is running against 2 million rows that are running in the browser. So there's a lot of data in this table that you're seeing being refreshed and updated pretty much instantly.
One other thing here, and we talked about this in our kind of wrapper around DuckDB, so the evidence query engine. So as I'm moving this slider, we're debouncing these inputs so that we're not running 500 new queries each time your user is moving this. We wait for them to stop and then immediately execute the query. And so we're trying to do as much of that type of stuff around this in a way that you don't, as a developer, don't have to think about, to make it possible to build, these types of data apps that actually feel really good for your users to use.
Great. So we got a couple of questions.
Sure.
I'll put up this first one. Are there any average metrics? How long does it take for build data sources for prod? For example, a gigabyte is a minute.
Not off the top of my head, but yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say this is a big it depends question, because if you're doing a select star, then it's going to be much quicker than if you have a really complicated query. And compressing the data into Parquet depends on where you're running it. So if you build it locally, then that's probably gonna be faster than if you do it on Vercel or Netlify, where their runners are a little less powerful than your local machine.
Yeah, I think as a benchmark, some of the stuff that I've been testing, if we've got a file that's returning a couple of million rows, it builds in 15, 20 seconds on my local machine, which is a sort of a 2-year-old Mac.
And Gujarat, we've done a fair bit on the dev side, which we were not demoing today, but to support working with that build step and make that feel really comfortable. So we still watch your source files. We only rebuild the ones that have changes. We give you control over when you want to actually update those sources. So if you do have some enormous query that you're pushing into this that takes a long time, we are leaving that kind of more in your control. So you're not necessarily going to have to wait for that to run every time you boot your project.
Okay, a couple more questions.
Yeah.
So this one from Patrick: are charts clickable as well?
They're not right now, but they can be. So what we're launching today is all of this kind of underlying architecture to do client-side querying and kind of the evidence query engine and all the underlying multiple data source support. But charts can definitely become clickable. So all of that becomes possible with this. So if you wanted to treat a line chart as an input and have it emit an event that you could then consume in another query on your page, that's something that we could support for sure.
Okay, question from Richard: can you support data-driven inputs / parameters, e.g. a drop-down list of values built from a select distinct?
Yeah, you can. And actually the drop-down component that is in the current pre-release works exactly that way. So you can pass in a source query, and then you can say, I want my labels, like let's say it's a dropdown of people's names. You can actually just inline for your definition of what you want the labels to show up as kind of concat, first name, last name. So you can build, you can pass data from queries into inputs, and then input components, like all components now, can also issue their own queries. And that's really helpful for things like building hierarchical filtering systems and that type of thing.
Great. We've got a pretty detailed question from Kuatroka here about a specific size of data. I'm thinking that this is probably going to be one that's going to be easier to answer on Slack. So we'll take that on Slack later if that's okay.
Cool. Let's I'll drive on here and show a couple more kind of examples. So here we're doing a kind of standard like monthly report. Often people would do this in Evidence with a parameterized page, and they would generate kind of individual pages for each time period. And we've rigged this one up to use Universal SQL and use a little input box. So as I toggle through the months here, again, this is kind of a 2 million record data set. We just animate through each of these changes. And again, with the debouncing, like if somebody sort of rage clicks their way from February to May, we don't have to re-execute all of those queries. We just move through them and then really quickly update the page once they get there. So again, making it possible to build data apps that just feel good to use because they have this low kind of latency on user input, but just working in templated SQL and components. And again, animation just being like a core part of making this possible for people to follow what's going on the page. Thank you. So two more things to show, and then we'll probably be coming close to the end. So this is a little component that we rigged up to do this kind of like leaderboard experience. And then each of these link to a parameterized page. Parameterized pages have been a core kind of part of Evidence from the beginning. And so this is a single markdown file that's generating a page for every one of these subscription types. Parameterized pages, like this pattern, we don't think is, we really like this, and people build really awesome stuff with this. So we're continuing to support parameterized pages, and page parameters can be passed. Where was the parameter there? Page parameters can be passed into your SQL queries using the same templating system. So rather than having to do kind of JavaScript-y stuff to work with the original sort of raw data set and filter it on the page, you can just wire from the URL directly into your SQL query. And you think this is just such a powerful kind of pattern for building apps that people are more navigating around rather than interacting with. Hey, Jacob. Okay, and the last thing we'll show you, and this is very much a pre-release thing because this is a community call, is a data table. And this is powered by Universal SQL. This type of thing, before we would put this on main, we would clean up the looks a little bit, but this is the type of thing that becomes possible. So this is a sort of large, like Explorer type of data table, again, referencing a couple million records of data. And when I go and break down, by bike type, if I want to grab the, average trip duration, there we go. And this is basically, instantaneous response time. So if your users, like you get a finance department or whatever, and they, no matter how much of a amazing data app you build for them, all they want is a pivot table of the general ledger. You can build them a great pivot table with a one-line component, and it's going to be really, really fast for them. So yeah, lots of really cool stuff coming. Okay, that concludes the kind of demo portion. Archie, any other questions that we should touch on before we get back to slides? Archie, you're on mute.
No questions. Just lots of people pretty excited about some of these things. Oh, we got a question from Jacob just come in.
Yeah. So Jacob, that's a great question. So right now, the way that we think about like drill in, drill through kind of motions is mostly in this, navigational, hey, I'm drilling into the Explorer subscription and we've got a parameterized page, and that's what the report looks like for an individual subscription. This does kind of completely unblock the ability to build more generic drill in, drill through types of motions. We're going to have to sort of think through how that works, but fundamentally components can start with a query that you wrote, modify that query, and then issue their own query. Like that's all the ingredients for drill down, drill across type of motions as well. So we are definitely thinking about it, and we would love to have input from everybody about how to what would be really helpful there.
We've got one more question,
Sure.
which I think is pretty interesting. So this question's about effectively more of a like embedded style of app. So is there a way to create a login or register experience, or a way to subscribe through Stripe using Evidence?
Yes. So that is not part of our open source offering, but definitely we've got folks using our cloud service for that type of thing. So and we're very interested in all the kind of variations of embedded, from I just want to put evidence as a portion of my existing application, to really my whole application is just an evidence project, and I want to be able to deliver it to users and let themselves sign up and eventually onboard their own data. So definitely that's something that we're super keen on, and if you're interested in building that type of thing, get in touch.
And one follow-up question on that, with a custom domain or with an evidence domain?
The cloud team is not on the call right now, but we could definitely do custom domains. So we've gotten that request from quite a few people. So that is something that we are going to support with Evidence Cloud. Okay, great. I will head back to slides. So last slide here is just in terms of timelines. So this December, starting probably at the end of the week, we're going to bring Universal SQL onto main. This will immediately bring multiple data source support, the evidence query engine, and the first kind of smallest chunk of input components. And we're going to expand those input components over the course of December. We're also going to offer up a migration guide, and we're going to continue supporting legacy projects, and we'll have a legacy branch to do bug fixes there for some time. And then beyond, a lot of kind of performance tuning to really find out those limits and expand those limits for how much data you can actually deliver kind of interactively. New components like pivot tables, a SQL console Brian has whipped up internally. So if you actually just wanted to put a SQL console onto the page for your end users, that's likely a component that will ship. And then more sources. So not just data warehouses, but API endpoints. So if you want to connect directly to the Stripe API or the Shopify API, and then work with it in Evidence Query Engine downstream, we will be supporting that as well. So that is Universal SQL. That was our first community call. It was a lot of fun. Thank you everybody for being here. And thanks to everyone who's helped us test this out and listen to our kind of early ideas on this, and talk through the pre-release branch with us. And thank you to all of you for all of your help. Cool. Oh, thanks, Adam. Yeah, if folks like this is a lot of fun for us. So I think we will probably do some more of these types of webinars and community calls in the future.
Cool. And Final thing, if we're going to be releasing this pretty soon, but if you want to get ahead, we have a pre-release channel in Slack where you can find a couple of people who are starting to use Universal SQL already, and we have a next branch on our template project in GitHub, so you can test out some of these features ahead of the game. They are still work in progress, so there may be a couple of bugs we're ironing out before the release, but always excited to get new people using Universal SQL.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.